What I'm absolutely disgusted by, and the reason for this video, is the despicable politicization of the death of a 7-year-old Guatemalan girl, who by no choice of her own was forced to walk across miles of dangerous desert through areas largely controlled by drug cartels and human smugglers, died from dehydration and exhaustion. The Washington Post should be ashamed of itself for their headline and coverage of this tragic event. So I just want to take the time to drop this hellfire-breathing dragon scorched earth truth bomb on the Washington Post.
Are we the hunters, or are we the prey?
Before we get into this disgraceful article published by the Washington Post and the sinister people who tweeted it out without any regard for the truth, let's take a moment to put everything into context because, as awful as this event is, it's not a standalone. National borders, border security, migration. These issues have been catapulted to the forefront of political debate. The migrant caravan has brought much needed attention to the issue of border security. Regardless of what the media tells you, the Yellow Vest riots spreading throughout Europe have a lot to do with the hundreds of thousands of migrants who have recently flooded into the various countries whose leadership holds strong open border policies. The United Nations put forward a bill that makes migration a human right and basically dissolves national borders. Bureaucrats in the EU stated that their wishes are to make criticizing migration a criminal offense. And Donald Trump, well, he just squared off with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in the White House like it was some sort of pre-WrestleMania fight hype promo over funding for the border wall on America's southern border. The young girl's death is a tragedy, and it ought to cause all of us to take a step back and take a deeper look at the issues from the entire range of perspectives. I understand that it's absolutely unreasonable to legislate national policy based on one exclusive event, but it should prompt us to put our focus and energy into figuring out the best solutions, out of respect for the innocence of children, if for nothing else. But what should we consider? The moral issues, the economic issues, the safety issues of both migrants and Americans? We should consider everything and make something happen. But instead of being humbled by this event, the Washington Post decides to publish this article. 7-year-old migrant girl taken into Border Patrol custody dies of hydration, exhaustion. Now, if you know the story, you could say, yeah, that's true. That's technically what happened. But you could also put an article forward that says, bank robber taken into doctor's custody dies from lack of blood, implying that the doctor had something to do with the bank robber's death, maybe even implying malpractice of some sort, when in reality the bank robber got into a shootout with police, got shot, transported to the hospital where the doctor did everything he could to save the robber, but the wound was too much to deal with and the robber died. This is what the Washington Post article is implying about the Border Patrol agents. They're politicizing the issue of migration and border security. They're implying that the Border Patrol agents are responsible for the girl's death, that the girl was fine when she was taken into Border Patrol custody, that they didn't feed her or give her water and let her die, that they somehow did this to her. Remember how the media portrays the Border Patrol agents. They say that they throw kids in cages, that ICE agents are like Hitler's Gestapo, and that Donald Trump is a racist who hates Mexicans. The context is important. This is just another demonization of the Border Patrol agents. What the Washington Post fails to even hint at in their headline is that the little girl had not eaten or consumed water for several days before being brought into Border Patrol custody. What they fail to tell you is that her father didn't give her food or water for several days. What they fail to tell you is that Border Patrol agents did everything they could to save this little girl's life, including helivacing her, flying her from in a helicopter to a hospital. They helivaced her to the best children's hospital in the entire region. You see, the truth of the story is that the Border Patrol agents in the fiscal year 2018 alone carried out over 4,300 rescue operations for migrants along or near the U.S.-Mexico border. When people decided to leave their country and head north to the United States, they faced dangerous terrain and dangerous conditions. Certainly no journey for a child, especially when you don't have enough food or water for the journey. These Border Patrol agents risk their own lives to rescue migrants who place themselves in dangerous situations. You could say they're coming north for a better life, but there has to be other political solutions or options other than walking across miles of desert. But look at this headline. It gives absolutely no personal responsibility to the girl's father. The article goes on to state, immigration officials said a 7-year-old Guatemalan girl died from dehydration and shock after she and her father were taken into custody on December 6th. She was crossing from Mexico into the U.S. illegally with her father and a large group of migrants along a remote area of New Mexico desert. The child's death is likely to intensify scrutiny and the tensions that Border Patrol agents and facilities that are increasingly overwhelmed by large numbers of families seeking asylum in the U.S. According to records, the girl and her father were taken into custody about 10 p.m. on December 6th, south of Lordsburg, New Mexico, as a part of a large group of 163 people who approached U.S. agents to turn themselves in. More than 8 hours later, the child began having seizures at 6:25 a.m. CBP records show. Emergency responders who arrived soon after measured her body temperature at 105.7 degrees, and according to a statement from CBP, she reportedly had not eaten or consumed water for several days. So what happens is Border Patrol agents come across 163 people in a remote area of the desert. The little girl at this point hasn't had a drink or food in several days. This isn't the article anymore. The agents have to transfer and process 163 people. That's a lot of people. During this process, they have to transfer them and process them. During this process, the girl begins to have a seizure. They start helping her. They find out she has a 105.7 degree temperature. They board her on a helicopter, send her to Providence Children's Hospital in El Paso. The girl goes into cardiac arrest at the hospital. They revive her. They give her the best help they possibly could, but because the child didn't eat or consume water for several days, she died from dehydration and exhaustion. And the Washington Post headline reads, 7-year-old migrant girl taken into Border Patrol custody dies of dehydration and exhaustion. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a headline clearly motivated by an agenda. This entire narrative on the Border Patrol agents is a misinformation campaign meant to demonize the people who did everything they could to save this little girl's life. The girl was forced into this situation by her father, neglected by her father. Any decent writer, editor, or publisher would have sent this headline back for revision or had it changed to better depict the truth of the events that led to this little girl's death. But that doesn't fit the Democrat narrative. Do you see why the president calls the fake news the enemy of the people? The Washington Post is clearly and blatantly misleading its own audience with this headline. How sinister to use the death of a little girl to push your political agenda on migration and border security. And before you say that I'm some kind of crazy conspiracy theorist and I'm overanalyzing this headline, let's take a look at what the evil queen herself said about tragedies and crisis.
And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
I'm very well aware that we are not yet through this economic crisis, but you know, we have the chief of staff for President Obama is an old friend of mine and my husband's, and was in the White House when Bill was there, and he said, you know, never waste a good crisis. And when it comes to the economic crisis, don't waste it when it can have a very positive impact on climate change and energy security, and that's what we're trying to do.
And don't think she let this one slip through her claws either. Here she is again tweeting out about this 7-year-old migrant girl. There are no words to capture the horror of a 7-year-old girl dying of dehydration in U.S. custody. What's happening at our border is a humanitarian crisis. Nothing about Border Patrol agents trying to save her life, or the 4,300 other rescue missions, or how the father didn't feed her or give her water, or about how migrants should not try to come to the United States because the journey is life-threatening to kids or anything. Just that, you know, she died in Border Patrol custody, U.S. custody, and that, you know, she's implying the Border Patrol agents are bad, Orange Man bad, no personal responsibility here. Blame the agents. She's such a vile, vile person. Look at, here you go, another Democrat, Kamala Harris, also tweeted, "This is tragic. We need a full and thorough investigative account of what happened before the 7-year-old girl died of dehydration, exhaustion in CBP custody." Notice how they all throw that in there. The Washington Post, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, while in CBP custody. Again, implying it's their fault she died. Do you see the twist? Do you see it? A full and thorough investigative account. I'm sure she means that we should investigate the father too, right? Maybe put him in prison for child abuse. I'm sure that's what she means, right, Kamala Harris? You're so honest, right, Kamala Harris? The Washington Post, however, doubled down in this tweet saying, the 7-year-old girl who died in Border Patrol custody was healthy before she arrived, her father says. Just an FYI, it's impossible to go from normal hydration to death in 8 hours. The Washington Post is now straight up lying for their narrative. These people make me sick. Here's a statement from the Department of Homeland Security. As we have always said, traveling north illegally is extremely dangerous. Drug cartels, human smugglers, and the elements pose deadly risks to anyone who come across the border illegally. Border Patrol always takes care of individuals in their countries and does everything in their power to keep them safe. Every year, the Border Patrol saves hundreds of people who are overcome by the elements between our ports of entry. Unfortunately, despite our best efforts and the best efforts of the medical team treating the child, we were unable to stop this tragedy from occurring. Once again, we are begging parents to not put themselves or their children at risk attempting to enter illegally. Please present yourself at a point of entry and seek to enter legally and safely. Here's what a White House spokesperson had to say.
It's a horrific, tragic situation. Obviously, our hearts go out to the family and to anyone who's suffered any type of danger and peril that they see so often when they make that trek up from the southern border. It's a horrific situation. There's no two ways about it, and it's a sad time, but it's also senseless. It's a needless death, and it's 100% preventable. If we could just come together and pass some common sense laws to disincentivize people from coming up from the border and encourage them to do it the right way, the legal way, then those types of deaths, those types of assaults, those types of rapes, the child smuggling, the human trafficking, that would all come to an end, and we hope Democrats join the president and get something to do. Does the administration take responsibility for a parent taking a child on a trek through Mexico to get to this country? No.
In stark contrast, the Democrats come out and say this is devastating and cruel. Absolutely, yes it is. The girl's death is devastating. But who is cruel? They would imply the Border Patrol agents. Absolutely not. No, the father is cruel. The weak borders that inspire people to be put in these situations in the first place, that's what's cruel. But they're not outraged about the father or the weak borders. They're not outraged at all. They lie to you and manipulate the story so the useful idiots become outraged with the Border Patrol agents and Donald Trump. They misinform and manipulate their own audience. This is the lowest of the low, scum of the earth behavior. The Democrats want to make a moral claim about the border wall. They always say the border wall is immoral. The idea of the border wall and what it represents is immoral to them. They can't get past the feels of it all. Well, I want to make this argument. If we had a border wall, little girls like this, and the 4,300 other migrants rescued by Border Patrol agents wouldn't even be put in this situation, because they know that the only possible way to enter the U.S. through its southern border is by knocking on the door and coming in legally. When you have a strong border wall, people won't leave their homes and walk across tens of miles of dangerous desert to sneak into the country. No more dead children. Build the wall. But the last thing I'll say here is this, and it goes back to the big picture. To anyone who's paying attention, it's obvious that there's an agenda to flood the first world countries with people from second and third world countries. The UN, a group comprised of mostly unelected people, want to dictate how nations run their borders. And by that I mean they want to eliminate the borders entirely. Hillary Clinton proposed a completely open Western Hemisphere. The Democrats, neoconservatives, and never-Trumpers in our government will oppose the wall at all costs, even when their own argument of morality falls flat on its face. Economically, the wall will pay for itself in a year or two's time. But that's another situation. That's a whole nother video. I was never a big supporter of the wall. But with the United Nations Compact for Migration, a wall might be our only option. With Nancy Boyd, Justin Trudeau, and Canada basically leading the charge on the UN Migrant Compact, we might even need one at our northern borders too. If you found this video helpful, please share it to get the word out about these manipulative fake news outlets like the Washington Post. If you'd like some unique MAGA gear and some unique MAGA accessories, check out AmazingOutliers.com. And don't forget to lick that smash button and subscribe. Until next time, Outliers.